In this episode, we're going to take a look at the top 10 fantasy football defenses you should be targeting in your 2018 draft. We'll also consider whether you should use the streaming defense strategy. All coming up now. Hello everyone, I'm Eric Lee.
And I'm Gary Kurtzman, and we are the Fantasy Football Consultants. So Eric, I'm really excited about this show. We get to talk about defenses, and well, admittedly, in most fantasy drafts you see people drafting towards the end of the draft, second to last round, sometimes third to last round, but we're going to talk about a couple of defenses that are going to have people challenging that timing.
Yeah, it is all about timing for when is the right time to snatch up the right defense.
So what are the right defenses? Let's get right to it. The number one defense on our top 10 list shouldn't be any surprise to anyone, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They were not only, Eric, the top defense last year, but they had historic comparisons to the steel curtain of the 70s in Pittsburgh, to the 85 Bears, even the 2015 Broncos. They were tops in sacks. They were tops in yardage allowed, tops in points allowed. They were top 4 in turnovers. They basically, Eric, everything that a defense can do well, Jacksonville did exceptionally well. They started 5. That's virtually half their defense. 5 of their defense were starters in the Pro Bowl. All are going to be returning this year. The easiest pick on the draft all year is going to be Jacksonville, first off the board.
Number 2, but a close number 2 behind Jacksonville is the Los Angeles Rams. Gary, the Rams were outstanding last year. They were the number 3 overall fantasy defense in scoring, but they improved greatly in the offseason. They added 2 cornerbacks that were going to really help their team, Marcus Peters and Aqib Talib. Also, the defensive line, headed by Aaron Donald, Defensive Player of the Year, is going to be helped even more by the fact that they spent $14 million on the Ndamukong Suh, and they are the head of the class in the NFC West. Look for them to beat up on the Niners, Seahawks, and Cardinals this year.
Absolutely. And we're going to take a tiny step down now. Still in the top tier, but tiny step down to number 3 defense, Minnesota Vikings. You know, Eric, what I like about the Vikings is that they allowed the second least number of points, the second least number of yards last year. And, you know, these are very, very correlated from year to year. So you can count on their defense being exceptionally good in that regard this year. What is less correlated is turnovers, and frankly, Minnesota was middle of the road in turnovers. That's the reason why they fell from the number 1 defense in 2016 to still in the top 5, but fringes the top 5 in 2017. But that's the kind of thing that reverts to the mean historically. And if Minnesota can up their turnovers a bit, which they're plenty capable of doing and have done in previous years, they're going to find themselves on the top 3 defensive short list in 2018, which is why they're on the top 3 short list on our fantasy draft here in this video.
Number 4 on the list is your Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Look, the Eagles were the 4th ranked defense last year, and look, they are among the league leaders in interceptions, fumble recoveries, and defensive TDs. The one area that they were middle of the pack, though, was in sacks, which is so important for a defense. But they just went out in the offseason and got defensive end star Michael Bennett from the Seahawks. Look for a team, Philadelphia, who's going to be ahead a lot in games, defense to shine this year.
Very good point. Now, rounding on our top 5, the 5th defense on the list, your Los Angeles Chargers. Now, if you're counting at home, that's 2 top 5 performances from LA, so that's going to be fun to watch, the rivalry there. The Chargers, now bear in mind, the Chargers have always had an historically good defense. They were hurt a little bit last year because, frankly, you know, the offense fell apart due to injury, and that's going to hurt your defense because the Chargers just flat out were behind in most games, which hurts the defense. That should not be nearly as true in 2018. They've always had the talent. 3rd fewest yards allowed and points allowed last year, you know, even with being hurt by their offense. Their sack total should go up with injuries, although they were still made the fringes of the top 6 in sacks last year. Basically, the bottom line is all the statistics that are correlated from year to year are going in the Chargers' favor. Very good roster, returning 3 Pro Bowlers. This is going to round out our top 5 defense.
So we had a tier 1 of 6 defenses that we need to separate themselves from the pack, and let's show that on the screen. That is Jacksonville, LA Rams, Minnesota, Philadelphia, LA Chargers, and number 6 on that list is the Houston Texans. And Gary, Houston has an excellent defense. Last year, they were doing just fine through the first 4 weeks of the season. They were ranked number 4 of all the fantasy defenses in scoring. And then the wheels came off as far as injuries left and right. And J.J. Watt got hurt. Whitney Merciless got hurt. And QB
Deshaun Watson got hurt too. Yeah.
And then, so the problem there is the entire offense now is struggling. They're not ahead in games. The defense is hampered by all kinds of injuries. They're all coming back healthy this year. I really expect Houston to have a great year. And the fact that they are in the AFC South, which is a real shortage of talented offenses. You've got Jacksonville, the Titans, and the Colts. I think that they'll clean up this year.
Yeah, no question. Much healthier. They're playing, average to middle of the road teams in the AFC South. That is going to help them quite a bit. So that rounds out our first tier of defenses, top 6 defenses. Starting with the second tier, your 7th ranked defense, your Denver Broncos.
Inconceivable!
We're only 2 years removed from talking about the Denver Broncos as one of the best defenses in football. What happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. In 2017, they were the 13th best defense, middle of the road. Frankly, that wasn't an aberration. They simply let too much talent walk out the door. Doing it a little bit again in 2018 with the Aqib Talib jumping ship, to Los Angeles. The bottom line is they picked up Bradley Chubb in the draft, 5th overall. Huge asset. They can pair him with Von Miller. Even that compares to Jacksonville and the Los Angeles Rams. They're all going to compete for the best pass rush in football, but they don't have much behind it. Their secondary is average as best. Same with their linebacking core. Their offense, they hope that they found their QB of the future, but on paper, this still looks like a middle of the road or below offense, which is going to hurt their defense. Their team overall is just not going to be that great this year. They're not going to have the defense to bail them out. They're 7th overall by virtue of the fact that they're going to get a ton of sacks, a ton of hurries, which should lead to turnovers. But Eric, that's why Denver is no longer in the top tier of defenses.
And number 8 on the list is the Baltimore Ravens. Hey, Gary, the Baltimore Ravens have a great secondary. They led the league last year in interception, among the league leaders in fumble recoveries. What I expect from this team is that they are going to clean up in the first 6 games of the season. So it's an excellent team to target in the draft late if these other defenses are all taken. Look at the offenses they get to face in the first 6 games. Buffalo, Cincinnati, Denver, Cleveland, and Tennessee.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a streaming opportunity for the first 5 weeks, but it's the same defense. And more on streaming in a couple minutes. Let's round out our top 10. So now we're down to number 9, defense in the New England Patriots. So Eric, all the New England Patriots have done has been a top 10 defense in 2012 and 2013 and 2014, 2015, 2016, and now the wheels came off for the New England team in general in the first few weeks of the season last year. But in 2017, after week 5, they were the number 6th ranked defense throughout the entire rest of the season. What's my point? They are incredibly consistent. It almost seems like Belichick on defense as in offense. They kind of have this rotating set of players that can plug and play, and they're such a good judge of talent, they can always do well. So it's not so much they've had the same set of returning Pro Bowls from year to year. It's definitely system-oriented. But, Eric, they are so massively consistent that they are in everybody's top 10 defense list. In 2018, they're certainly in ours as well.
We'll round out our top 10 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's only two things that you need to know, Gary. One, the Steelers led the league in sacks last year. And if you're down to number 10, that means all the other 9 have been taken. Go with Pittsburgh because they will start your streaming strategy because they start playing week 1, the Cleveland Browns.
Oh, that's a fantastic matchup.
So let's talk a little bit about this streaming defense philosophy. The question is, should you just ignore this list and say, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up and drop defenses each week based on the matchup. That's what we call streaming defense. In the league that we've been involved with, there's only a few teams that actually take advantage of this. The question is, should you do that in your league? So, Gary, what are the factors that people should consider in deciding whether they use the streaming defense?
Sure, and there are a few important factors to consider. I think one of the most important is what's your budget?
Show me the money.
So, in some leagues, there's a fab budget. You have a certain number of dollars that you can spend on transactions throughout the year. And remember, there's a minimum of $1. So if you stream for 16 weeks, that's $16 out of your budget. A lot of fab budgets are $100. So you've literally spent 1/6 of your budget and set it aside for streaming defenses. That's going to put you at a disadvantage for being able to pick up, that star quarterback or running back that you need to bolster your roster. On the other hand, some, instead of a fab budget, they go by number of transactions. You can have 25 transactions, 30 transactions throughout the year. That's even more constraining because that's 1 transaction per week for 16 weeks. If you have a 30 transaction budget, you're literally blowing half of your budget on streaming defenses. That's simply untenable. I think, Eric, once you get above 20 or 25%, you simply can't allocate more than that to picking up defenses. So if your budget will constrain you and streaming defenses will take more than 20 or 25% of your total season-long budget, it frankly becomes a far less tenable strategy.
I think the other thing you need to consider is what can be the pool of talent out there for you to pick up a quality defense. So if you have a lot of teams in your league, then of course each team will at least have 1 defense. There are going to be less defense which will be viable options for you. So I think if it's a 10-team or less league, I think you're in good shape. But when you start getting greater than 12, then it's going to be very slim pickings.
Absolutely. And here's something to think about. You know all this before the draft. You know what your fab budget is, your transaction budget, if you have one before the draft. And of course, you know how big the draft size is. Is it 10 or less, or is it 12 or greater? You know all this before the draft. So going in, that's the time when you think about your strategy of when to pick a defense. There are, as our list would imply, 6 defenses in the top tier, 6 defenses that we can trust to be among the top defenses. And if you have one of those, you're going to be better off, throughout the year with one of those than you would with streaming anyway. So when do you target one of those top 6? If you decide before the draft that streaming is not a viable option, usually in drafts, people pick defenses in the 2nd to last round, save the last round for the kicker. Sometimes, of course, people reach in the 3rd to last round for the top defenses. And so you'll really want to consider that timing. Drafting one of the top 6 defenses in that 3rd to last round, not waiting till the 2nd to last round. Try and get a little bit ahead of the curve because if streaming isn't viable and you don't use that strategy, it's more likely than not that you're going to be stuck with a defense outside the top 6, and that's incrementally going to put you at a disadvantage.
Yeah, it's very important to have a strategy going into your draft. If you know that streaming is not a good strategy, you probably want to pick a defense a little earlier than you otherwise would have.
Absolutely, and I think just in my own personal experience with the 50 or so fantasy football leagues I've been in, probably about half the players end up streaming and half don't. So it's a very viable strategy if it can work for you and your league setup.
Real briefly, what do you look for when you're deciding a defense to select for streaming?
Well, you know, a couple of things that are really important to look for. One, which I think is the most important, is who are they playing? You know, it almost seems like you should look first at what the defense is and how well they're doing, and you should. But it matters so much who they're playing because, you know, by week 3 or week 4, you'll know who the bad offenses are.
So there it is. You've got our top 10 list as well as all the factors you need to decide and whether you decide to stream defenses. So we hope that you enjoyed this content. If you did, go ahead and give us a like by clicking the like button below.
And if you'd like to avail yourself of the content, not just this video, but all the video and all the analysis that Fantasy Football Consultants provides, whether it be positional analysis, whether it be rest of season rankings, or whether it be help on week to week for those troublesome pickup and drop decisions, then please do hit the red subscribe button to subscribe